Well, hello, everybody. Today is Thursday, December 3rd. It's just amazing how fast time flies. And once again, I am so happy that my esteemed colleagues and partners, Brian Cermak and Hugh Woodrow, are joining me today on the Cronin Law Show. We are going to be some new information, in this ever-changing COVID pandemic landscape. Everything just seems to be rolling along, and I'm so happy that they're here with me. And please bring any questions that you have, whether it's related to the pandemic, whether it's related to any legal concern you might have, whether it's related to just, really anything. Maybe not the weather, because we're not really good, but we will help you to navigate any kind of legal issue or concern that you might have or might be troubling you or your family or your neighbor or friends. We're here for you 24/7. The Cronin Law Firm, 248-258-3500. Without further ado, Brian Cermak and Hugh Woodrow. Good morning, everybody.
Hey, Sabrina.
Good morning.
How are you two?
Same as always. Awesome.
Same as always. Yeah. Well, I know that, before the show, we were all talking about just some changes in some of the case status. I know with respect to COVID and different segments of the population, different organizations, they were trying to appeal to the courts, their causes rather. They were trying to appeal to the courts and get some of the, basically the executive orders overturned. I know different states and different governments had different rulings. What can either of you talk about really what's happening with respect to different groupings of people and organizations?
Well, let me start on that. The Supreme Court, which is now changed since we have a new justice, and they say it's more conservative, issued an opinion a couple of weeks ago on a case filed involving the state of New York. Governor Cuomo, and I won't say whether I like him or dislike him, one of the multiple edicts that he came down with in New York classified zones within New York. Orange zones, red zones, blue zones, whatever. And the zones related to the prevalence of COVID, hospitalizations, blah, 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 blah. And what happened was it said if you're in a certain zone, and I don't remember if it's red or orange, you couldn't have a public meeting of more than 10 people in the same room. And if you're in the other zone, you can have more than 25. So the Catholic diocese in Brooklyn and a temple in Brooklyn appealed that and said, First Amendment, freedom of religion, a bad restraint upon us. Now, interestingly, multiple months ago, there was a similar case that was heard by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, decided, yeah, the government can impose restrictions. Let's forget about the First Amendment because these are extraordinary times kind of thing. Now that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed and we have a new justice, this new case came down in a 5-4 decision, exactly the opposite. 5 justices said, and I wrote this down because I thought it was great. There were 4 opinions, 1 dissenting, 3. It said, even though the pandemic exists, the Constitution cannot be put away and forgotten. In other words, there might be times, extraordinary times, where emergency measures may overtake the Constitution temporarily, but the majority of the court said those times are gone. You can't, the Constitution doesn't go in hibernation, and those freedoms still exist. Now, the dissents didn't necessarily disagree with that, but the dissents were, well, we don't need to decide this now, because when the case started, and cases take a long time to go to the district court, to a court of appeals, to the Supreme Court, the facts have changed. The dioceses in Brooklyn and where the synagogue was, they came out of the red zone, orange zone category. So the four dissenters said, well, we really don't need to decide this. We're not disagreeing, we're not agreeing, but it's moot. Why decide it now? But you now do seriously have a strong conservative group that I think any future appeal to the Supreme Court that challenges or puts on opposite sides the rights of the states to do something because of the pandemic or emergency versus the Constitution and constitutional rights, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, etc. I think there's a strong five now that will say the Constitution prevails and those individual freedoms and rights are more important. Who knows what's going to happen in the next cases? Because there are currently 11 cases at the Court of Appeals level that the Supreme Court can either hear or they can say, nope, look at our last decision. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few months, unless, of course, we get the vaccine and this all goes away.
So, Brian, I have a question relative to how this will trickle down to the states. As you know, in our state, not too long ago, some of the governor's executive orders were deemed unconstitutional. That being said, the state agencies really took over that rule and they are mandating, some of these same regulations that the governor was imposing, although, so they're circumventing basically the Michigan Supreme Court's ruling deeming certain things unconstitutional, but then enforcing, for the agencies then to enforce these rules and go another step further and say if these businesses or these companies or whatever are not abiding by, mask wearing and et cetera, then we're going to fine these businesses. I had Judge Warren from Oakland County, the Oakland County bench, the circuit court judge, on the show, and I asked him the question, how will that be determined? If a company is sanctioned by MIOSHA, for instance, and, brings a case against MIOSHA for saying, this is unconstitutional, how would you rule? And he said, I can't speak to them. I'm sure we will be having some of those cases. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are regarding this.
Well, the Supreme Court of the United States, what they rule is the rule of the land. However, the history shows us that the Supreme Court can take fact patterns that are very similar and have different decisions because, for example, the case I just talked about in New York was challenging a governor's order. Okay. Now, it didn't involve a state agency making a ruling, right? So I can see the Supreme Court, I can see the state going in and saying this is a state agency, and I can see the people, the freedom of religion and the businesses saying, hey, I'm sorry, it's the same principle. And who knows what the Supreme Court will do? Will they say, deny the case and say, look at our last decision, which means one trumps the other. Freedom of religion trumps, or the freedoms provided by the Constitution trump the executive orders of the state agency orders. Will the Supreme Court accept the case and hear it and make some distinguishing remark saying this is slightly different? And if you have a state agency for a particular community, I really don't see them doing that because the same reasoning behind the state orders and the governor's edicts are identical. It's health, welfare, and safety of our communities and our citizens. And it seems to me that the language used by the Supreme Court is pretty darn clear. They're going to look at that narrowly. Maybe they will allow it for limited periods of time, but overall, the Constitution doesn't hibernate, doesn't go away. Those freedoms that were provided under our Constitution remain, and they're going to trump anything else, absent an absolute emergency. I mean, one of the judges in his consenting opinion said, yeah, we got a pandemic, but you know what? Things are changing, and we've got vaccines coming, and this is a ever-changing daily situation. Just look at the news. But one thing that doesn't change is their Constitution, and I know those challenges are going to come, but my gut's telling me the Supreme Court is going to say whether the governor issues an executive order or a state agency in a local county issues an order, it's a distinction without a difference. The principles will remain the same. Whether it be the governor or the state agency, they're trying to protect citizens on the same basis. And I think the Supreme Court will say, not allowed. Constitutionally, you can't set aside the rights of the citizens.
What about all the discussion, pre-election about, the talk of different parties, and we're not going to name the parties, trying to do away with various components of the Constitution? Is that a fallacy? Is that possible? Can it be done? I'd like both of you to opine with respect to that for our viewers, because we get that question quite a bit.
The Supreme Court is supposed to be an independent judiciary. They're appointed for life. They account to no one. They have their job until they die. But there's a political aspect to it, because let's face it, the Supreme Court justices are appointed by the president. And whoever the sitting president is, whether he's red or blue, right? He or she, I should say she, because we may have a female president very shortly. But we won't go down that path. The president's going to appoint someone, generally speaking, that he or she believes is in line with his political beliefs. It doesn't always work that way, though. It's funny. There are several justices. Our current Supreme Court Chief Judge, for example, who was appointed by a conservative president, thought to be conservative, and in all the 5-4 decisions in the past years since he's been appointed, he's voted with the liberals. Sometimes people have this find Jesus type of meeting, and they just do what's in their heart. So you've got political appointments that are definitely, you've got appointments that are supposed to be non-political that are political, but you never know what a judge is going to do when they get on the court. I think the bigger question is going to be is this. This last case is a clear sign to me that you've got 5 strong conservative justices. You've got 3 justices that are definitely liberal. Then you got that chief judge who's supposed to be conservative, but he's been voting liberal. But no matter how he votes, you've got this conservative bent to the court. So the bigger issue to me is, if the Democrats take over everything, are they going to try to stack the bench and say, 9 justices aren't enough? Let's make the Supreme Court be 13 people, and then the new Democratic president can appoint more liberal justices. I mean, I hope they don't go that route, because I think it would make a joke of our system. We've had the 9 judges for years and years and years and years. It seems to work. I would hate to see this one part of our 3-system check and balance be politicized to that degree.
Hugh, would you like to comment about that?
Well, I mean, again, Brian and I don't always agree on a lot of things, but on this stuff we do. So, I mean, yeah, it's the politics behind the appointment of the judges is always there, and doesn't matter what party's in power at the time. The one that's not in power is always going to complain about the appointment, saying that that's a Republican or a Democratic appointment. Granted, the appointment has to be approved by the Senate as well. And when you have the Senate more aligned with one party that's the same as the president, then it's a lot easier to push through a more conservative or more liberal judge on the other side. And that's kind of what happened this last time with the last appointment is, President Trump, as a Republican, pushed through an appointee and got ratified by the Senate in short order. Definitely a more conservative judge. That would not have happened if the Senate was controlled by the Democrats, but it wasn't. So we got this one pushed through pretty quickly, but it doesn't stop the other side from complaining. But that's the way it's been forever, and it seems to have worked. And a lot of people don't understand, and what Brian did touch on a bit is, the stacking of the Supreme Court is nothing new. It's the number of justices is not set by the Constitution, and it has changed throughout our history a number of times. It's been set at 9 for quite some time, but there's nothing stopping one political party from increasing or decreasing the number of justices. At one point in time, I think there were 13 in the United States, but it could be even higher. You could make it more if you wanted to. I mean, I hope they don't. Like Brian said, I really don't think they should. I think 9 is a pretty good number. I think it should stick at that. And some of the arguments that there's just too many cases for the Supreme Court and they're overworked and da 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 da. I don't. They have a huge judicial staff that work for them. Every single one of those justices probably has 8 to 15 attorneys, very well versed and intelligent attorneys that work for them and help research and write their opinions for them. If they need to increase their staff to help with the caseload, they could do that without increasing the number of justices.
Right. And just, for the sake of knowledge and information to our viewers, what do you both know about how, if at all, our Constitution can be changed? Obviously, we have various amendments. We have, various pieces to it. But what is the process, and how do we go about doing that?
Brian?
Yeah, I'm not a political science expert, but the bottom line is to ratify a change of the Constitution, it's got to be ratified by a certain number of the states. And I will give you the most maybe poignant and most recent example, Equal Rights Amendment, right? And if you recall, it was, equal rights for women, equal rights for women. And some states said, yeah, it's a good idea, ratify. And it came down to the deadline. I think you have 3 years or whatever it is to ratify an amendment to the Constitution, and you didn't get enough states. Mm-hmm. That is far different, though, than what Hugh was talking about in terms of stacking in the Supreme Court.
Oh, right.
The states have nothing to say with that. That is just the Congress. If they decide in their infinite wisdom we need 11 justices or 13 or 15, or go the opposite way, cut the 9 down to 7, which actually I don't think they could do, because there would be an inherent conflict between, we've got 9 Supreme Court justices appointed for life, and then they say, we only need 7. Well, which 2 are we going to fire? I don't think they can fire anybody. Maybe they die off, you can go back down to 7. But as far as the other concern is the Constitution's pretty sacrosanct, and you need a vast majority in states to ratify to make any change to it, and it's not easy.
No.
What about our state's Constitution?
What's that?
What about our state's Constitution?
Similar to, with the federal Constitution, Congress needs to propose an amendment to the Constitution. It has to pass both houses by a 2/3 vote. It then goes to the individual states' legislatures, who also have to approve it by 2/3 of the existing states have to approve that amendment to go into effect. Similar to that within the individual states, one of the branches of the government need to propose and draft up an amendment to it. It needs to go to both houses for approval, and I'm almost positive that actually has to go to a statewide vote. It's not obviously you can't send it down to the state legislature because they just did it. So in order for a state amendment, it has to be put on the ballot and it has to be voted on by the people.
Right.
Correct.
Right. I would like, it to be noted if, when the justices are appointed, like you said, Hugh and Brian, every president has had that opportunity. Well, maybe not every, but whether you're a Democratic president or a Republican president or an independent or whoever, they do have that opportunity if and when someone passes and there is a seat open. But like you said, the stacking has been going on for years and years and years. So, let's just hope that justice will prevail, right? No pun intended.
Will prevail, yes.
No pun intended. So, let's kind of, I guess stop with this. I don't know if we want to call it a lesson in constitutionality or whatever you want to go.
Now, you're back, Sabrina. You keep on freezing. Like Tuesday's show, you said, well, whatever. And then we had this nice little pose of Sabrina. And I go, uh-oh, mouth's not moving. But you're back now.
Well, at least it was a pose. At least it was a good pose.
And it was a beautiful pose.
Look at my face or something. I've gotten my internet connection checked a million times. I don't know what's going on, but I will definitely make a point to have Comcast come out again. I don't know what's happening, but anyway, I don't know where I froze. So did my question get out at all or no?
We missed the question.
Well, so I'd like to talk about the discussion in our state, in the state of Michigan, about different groupings trying to, again, bring their cause. And I used the word appeal earlier. I didn't mean like in the legal sense an appeal, but I mean, appeal their arguments. They're trying to bring forth their causes to our great system. And I know some of the local businesses have been trying to do that. I know different religious organizations too have tried to do that, but what do we know about what's going on within our own state?
There's at least 2 lawsuits that have been filed against the state against the Michigan Department of Health Services now rather than Governor Whitmer, because they're the ones that issued the new orders. One is from in County out of Lansing, and they have sued the governor saying that the requirement that children wear masks in school is against their religious beliefs, and they can't mandate that.
Who brought that, Hugh? It was hard to hear you on that.
Resurrection School in Ingham County, just outside of Lansing.
Okay.
There were 2 parents who have students in that school that joined in that lawsuit against the state as well.
Hey, Hugh, I got a quick question just before you go on. How could they say wearing a mask, now maybe I'm showing my conservative bent, violates their religious beliefs? I'm familiar with the Bible. I'm familiar with the Torah. I'm familiar with a lot of the religious books. I don't think wearing masks is listed in any of them.
I understand your statement, and I agree with you. I guess, from what I understand, the lawsuit states that the wearing of the mask makes it more difficult for their children to learn about their religion. It doesn't really say how that happens, but that's what they're stating. One of the parents is saying that their son suffers from allergies and can't stand wearing a mask all day. If I'm not mistaken, most of these mask mandates say if you have some medical condition that precludes you from wearing it, then you don't have to wear it. So I don't know the exact, real argument behind it. And obviously all the proponents to it say it's all, it's politically motivated. It's not really anything to do with their religion. But the other one that I think has a lot more validity to it is from the Michigan Restaurant and Lodge Association that's filed the lawsuit against them regarding the most recent shutdown and how the state came up with the list of people or restaurants and bars that get shut down and which ones don't seem to make a lot of sense to me. And they didn't shut down bars or didn't shut down gyms and swimming pools and stuff this time, but yet she shut down in-house dining, but outdoor dining you can still do, which I don't understand that one either. There's a local restaurant by us here that set up a giant tent in the parking lot that has a roof, 4 walls, heaters, everything inside. It's just as enclosed as the inside of the restaurant, but that's considered outside, so they can seat people out there and serve them food, but they can't serve them in the restaurant. And the main crux behind that argument that the Restaurant Association is stating is the governor and the state didn't even attempt to work anything out with them. They just enacted this. And that was the same complaint in New York too. And the restaurant said, hey, we're more than willing to work with you, but you can't just shut us down arbitrarily. And that's what they did. So we'll see where that one goes. But
it's interesting because this is all fertile ground for inventive attorneys. Because, and I haven't heard about this in Michigan, and I can't tell you what state it was, but there are some states where you can apply and get recognized as a church, right? And there are some bars and restaurants that have applied to be approved as congregations, and their doors, which would be closed on their executive order as bars, can open up because they're having a church service. Inventive, eh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I actually like the bar owner in New York. He put some cones out and spray painted on the sidewalk and created his own autonomous zone, like they did out in Portland, and said, well, I'm autonomous now, and I don't have a mask mandate, and I must close and I can't serve food mandate in my autonomous zone, so I'm going to keep doing that.
Well, you know how well that worked out in Portland, don't we?
Well, yeah, but it lasted a good 3 or 4 months before anything else happened. So if he lasts another 3 or 4 months as his own autonomous zone and keeps his doors open and people keep frequenting him, I guess he can get away with it. But
I think if anything else, all this tells us is this: the fabric of where we are is totally uncertain. We can wake up tomorrow and have new rules, and on Sunday have rules that go back to the old rules. And until things settle down pandemically and order-wise, all bets are off, because let's go through this whole thing. When you file a challenge like this, you're not filing jury trials. Like, somebody's hurt in an auto accident, a slip and fall, a defamation case. You want the jury to decide your case. These are cases that are filed and ask a judge to give an opinion. You don't like his opinion, you appeal it to the next court, whether it be the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. And by the time you get through that process, you might have another fact situation going up a different court, and it's all going to settle down. And
eventually,
I don't think anything that I think the courts have to be real careful now. They don't want to issue, especially our Supreme Court, rulings that are hasty or stupidly made or not well reasoned, that can be the law of the land in the future when we don't have the pandemic. That's the scary thing. And you've got some justices that are going to say some things that you go, oh, you know how these Court of Appeals decisions go. When you argue it, you're telling the court, here's what's been decided in the past. We don't want some stupid decisions or stupid statements coming down and affecting our life next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when we're not facing the same type of pandemic or emergency situations. That scares me as an attorney.
and right along with those lines, Brian, I mean, the CDC just came out with new guidelines again today, and so did WHO, about wearing masks and everything else. And the CDC now says, oh, we were wrong all before this. If you do get exposed to corona or COVID, you only have to quarantine for 7 to 10 days now, not 14. So again, our understanding of this bacteria and how it affects people and can be transmitted is ever changing too. So, and I think a lot of the courts are being cautious with this because they don't, like you said, they don't want to make a law or interpretation of a law that will be precedent for future laws on information that is changing every single day.
Well, the only way to enforce it is what just happened. I heard this morning, and driving to work this morning, was the issue about the couple that went to Hawaii. I don't know if you guys heard about this. Couple gets on a plane to go to Hawaii. I think they boarded in San Francisco or Portland, and they had to do a COVID, one of those rapid tests, before they can get in. And they both tested positive. Somehow, the airport authorities allowed them through. They boarded the plane. When they got off the plane in Hawaii, they were arrested for reckless endangerment. So some of these things, I mean, this crazy stuff happening all over. But
so they were arrested.
They were arrested.
Then
they were arrested the moment they got off the plane because they tested positive. They got on the plane nonetheless. They had the 6-hour flight over to Hawaii, and as they got off the plane, they were put in jail. Well, at least they're in jail in Hawaii. It's a lot better than being. Hey, if you want to look at the silver lining, yeah, if you're going to arrest me and I got to be quarantined, put me on a beach in Hawaii.
Well, they're saving on their lodging costs then, I guess.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness, guys. Well, I mean, that's just it. And then, and which state will impose those strict, criminal penalties? I mean, that's a criminal sanction, obviously.
Which,
we're not looking at just monetary.
Which Sabrina, you brought up the great point. Which state? We have 50 states. We've got, all right, someone in Monroe, Michigan, and someone in Toledo. They're separated by a mile across the border, right? And our laws are not the same as Ohio's laws. Mile of geographic distance where the kids, everything should be the same. Who's right and who's wrong? Why is it permissible to do something, but if I cross the street, it's not permissible? And honestly, I don't think the courts, they're hoping this goes away and it's solved. I don't think the courts should start getting into those distinctions, because states are supposed to be able to regulate and govern over their citizens. But now we're at just basic things. There's no difference whether you're infected in COVID in Indiana, Hawaii, Michigan, New York, Florida. It really doesn't matter. Those issues are the same. But I think you're going to see a general reluctance from the court from making any broad stroke opinions that can really damage us down the line. And I hope they do. I think they're smart enough to. But
well, the sample that you gave just a few minutes ago regarding the couple that boarded the plane in one state, and it was so obviously it was legal in that state. They go to Hawaii, they're then charged, but the law says, as we know in criminal law for sure, ignorance is no defense. So, there's no reconciliation between this. And I just, obviously my heart goes out to this couple. I don't know what happened to them, but, it's unfortunate that there's so much disparity among the states.
Well, the thing that bothers me is if wherever they boarded made you take a test and you tested positive, why did the airport authorities let them into the terminal and get on the plane? So they're not entirely culpable here. I mean, maybe I didn't hear the story the right way, but I did see the clip and they were arrested. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know that. But, then we have other countries that aren't allowing anyone in. Or if you do go in, you have to show, proof or quarantines. They were requiring the 14 days. It's interesting now the CDC doesn't say 14 days. Just like at the beginning of this pandemic, when everybody thought germs and the virus lasted on countertops, for days. And now, then shortly thereafter, they changed their opinion on it. And it's interesting, Brian. It's an ever-changing landscape. Nobody really knows.
Which is different than what the law normally is. As lawyers, we're used to change. But the change in the law usually takes years and years and years of well-reasoned decisions. And sometimes, even, for example, in terms of segregation, right? In terms of classic cases that everyone now would say, well, that's what the law is. It took years of small decisions until finally it was determined, no, this really is the law. And the problem with what we've got in the fabric of society now is they're changing things left and right, day by day, court by court, moment by moment, rather than looking at the big picture. And I hope we don't lose sight of the fact that we'll get through this, but let's not have our knee-jerk reactions to a present calamity and a pandemic and an emergency hold us down and tie us down later. We shouldn't do anything that's stupid,
I kind of liken this a little bit to some of our discussions regarding our clients, and communication and negotiation, whether it's a business client or a family law client or a personal injury client. whenever we're dealing with emotions, and I see that here with regard to this pandemic, especially among the communities and people in general, whenever people let their emotions rule or overtake them, thoughtful decision making does not happen. And, you know, again, Brian, to your point, if our government took a little bit more time and did not necessarily do these knee-jerk reactions and appeal to the people in our communities making the most noise, but rather took a step back and made thoughtful, level-headed decision based on facts, the facts as we know them, I don't think we would have all this turmoil and commotion.
Yeah.
And I see it now every day with people in general. And, you know, it's like the road rage is on steroids when it comes to people and mask wearing, and are they wearing masks? Are they? I mean, it's really, this has brought out such extreme cases of, you know, craziness among people. And I think the leaders in our nation really are not helping assuage any of this. Would you like to talk about this, or?
Well, you know, you broke up again, but that's okay. I think we know what you said. Right brain thinking, left brain thinking. And what jumped into my mind is, as soon as our show is done in about 20 minutes, I've got to talk to a client because we have a facilitation on a case. It's a case where, for me, from a purely non-emotional dollars and cents, what's the best decision for this person's, my client's life, that I believe is over here. She, on the other hand, because of the facts and because she's been in emotional turmoil, she believes that the case is over here. And now we're starting to blend that, and I've got to have a, you know, come to Jesus meeting with her, so to speak, is okay. I'm there to support your case over here. Forget which hand is which. I will support your case over here. But if I do that, be aware of this. And you got to kind of take a deep breath. And there's some times where, you know, going for what's right because you think you're right and you just want to feel good to have someone say you are right. Sometimes it's better to sit back and say, I didn't have anybody pat me on the back and justify me and say I was right. But all things considered, I did what was correct for me right now. You know, the most difficult things, you know, you talk about client control all the time. We're there to advise. And we've done this long enough, Sabrina, we can see a case, and Hugh, where we know how it's going to end up. We know the court. We've seen cases like this. We've handled them and say, this is where we're going to get. And I got you up to here. You ain't going to get up here. It doesn't happen. But their case is always different. And you know, we bleed with our clients. We talk to our clients. We're counselors. You know, it says attorney and counselor. Sometimes I'm more of a counselor than a damn attorney. And it's not me talking to the court, it's me talking to my client and explaining things. And yeah, we understand your empathy and we understand your feelings, but let's kind of think about this other stuff. And see, I'm just venting now because I've just got a tough afternoon in front of me.
No, that's fine. That's what we do. We counsel.
Yeah.
But more to your point from before, Spray, I think, again, the people out there, they get their brain set on a particular point or fact as they heard it on the news or read it on social media somewhere. And rather than corroborating that, they're I mean, I almost want to say it's almost blind acceptance of it sometimes is amazing to me. And they believe that down to their soul. And so they are right because that's what they know. And like I said, the lack of corroboration with facts and evidence right now is kind of amazing. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of stuff on the news coming out now that supports a lot of things that Trump was saying about the coronavirus that everybody was saying was wrong and was uncorroborated. Yet now there's all these experts that were coming out saying, I said this months ago, and we all knew this months ago. One of the biggest ones I saw in the news last night was the argument about how children, younger children, actually are not harbingers of COVID. They actually don't transmit it like everyone was saying that they did. And there were expert reports on this months ago saying that children are not susceptible to it as the mainstream media was saying, nor can they spread it like the mainstream media was saying. And now all these reports are coming out that are months old to corroborate that. So why didn't they come out before? Was it politically motivated? I don't know. But the general populace grabs onto the, in my opinion, misconceptions that are promoted by the mainstream media, and that's gospel to them. Doesn't matter now. When the other reports come out, they're saying, "Oh, no, that's not true. That can't be true."
Well, Hugh, I have two words to that.